For almost 2 decades, I dated for marriage. By my 30s, it felt more like a job interview and wasn't fun anymore. Then I discerned that I didn't actually want kids, and suddenly marriage seemed less urgent, maybe even unnecessary. Rather than agonizing over someone's values, goals, and finances, the only question I ask myself now is, am I having fun? It was revolutionary. And if I'm all about fun without trying to ride the relationship escalator up to marriage, seems like I could do that with more than one person. I've never been good at moderation. So within a few months of this new approach to dating, I found myself in a full-fledged polycule. A polycule is a network of people interconnected through overlapping romantic or sexual relationships. Everyone doesn't necessarily bang everyone else, but you will find yourself hanging out with others who date the same person or people that you do. Does this sound like a nightmare? I kind of thought so too at first. It started when I saw a Tinder profile for a guy we'll call Jake that said, "I'm polyamorous and in a throuple." And I thought to myself, woof. That sounds messy. No thanks. But then he messaged me something cute, and I was flattered by the attention. And isn't that just a tale as old as time? He told me about his experience with polyamory, which is a word I now find annoying. I prefer ethical non-monogamy. To those outside the lifestyle, the word polyamory probably conjures images of vegan hippies with dreadlocks, tattoos and piercings, free love between people named Star, Sky, and Rain, memberships in multiple dungeons and dragon groups, socially anxious Rinfest enthusiasts sloppily making out in public. And from my experience, I can tell you that all of those are 100% spot on. Part of polyamory sounded too good to be true. I like the idea of ethical non-monogamy, that everyone's intentions and connections would be out in the open and above board. One of the hallmarks of polyamory is, or should be, communication. Like, so much communication. Pretty much constant talking about your feelings, making sure everyone is informed about what you're getting up to romantically and sexually, and checking in with anyone who might be affected before things happen. And also, it just sounded hot. It started with solo dates with Jake. He gave me so much attention, and I was completely hypnotized by him in the bedroom. In monogamy, sex was over after each person came once, if that. Not the case with Jake, or the poly world in general. It wasn't a race to orgasm, and it did not usually stop at one. One time, we literally had sex all night until the next morning. More than 8 hours, only breaking for snacks. And my God, the fingering. Why are poly people weirdly good at fingering? When he dirty talked that he was gonna finger me so good, I had cringed, bracing myself for another clumsy, dirty fingernailed man to dryly and painfully finger me for a couple of seconds as foreplay. But Jake was a god at fingering. As I trembled from the aftershocks, worn out and wrapped in his arms, I told him I would join his cult if he started one. I was practically begging to give him all my money and be part of his harem. Speaking of harem, he wanted me to meet his other girlfriends and the whole polycule, which also included some male and non-binary connections. Surprisingly, I didn't feel jealous of his connections with other people. The word polyamory likes to use is compersion, which means feeling sympathetic joy for somebody else. At times, I felt annoyed that I didn't get as much of his time and attention as I wanted, but his emotional and physical connections with others didn't bother me. I was excited to meet all the sexy people I'd heard about and seen pictures of. The plan was to go to a concert together. I hung out with them for all of 30 minutes before we took drugs and went into the loud venue where we could no longer hear each other. Before I knew it, he was nowhere to be found, and two of his girlfriends were making out with me. It was all so much so soon. I thought polyamory meant there would be hours of conversation and extreme over-communication, like, do you consent to me holding your hand? Do you consent to me hugging you? I wanted to take in each new experience one at a time. But within a few hours, I was at my first orgy. Jake had mentioned that nights out with the polycule sometimes ended like this, and it sounded so erotic in theory. I was very aroused by the thought of exhibitionism and voyeurism, but I feared I would chicken out if presented with a real-life opportunity. As it turns out, I love it in real life, too. By my second orgy, I felt like a pro, even taking it upon myself to welcome an extremely hot and shy first-timer. And by welcome, I mean we had a foursome. This orgy had an exciting new element of exhibitionism because it was in a high-rise right next to the jail, and I'm quite sure the prisoners could see us. You might assume orgies would be extremely awkward, but group play was nothing short of transcendent. The tangle of hands and mouths was sort of bliss that made my mind go completely blank. I became all body, no thoughts, just senses, instincts, and emotions. I can only describe it as, whoa, this might be nirvana. And everything makes sense. This is actually the whole point of life. And now that I've experienced that kind of revelation and clarity, I'm forever chasing it. But as much as I loved the orgies, I equally disliked some of the interpersonal bullshit. First of all, I had constant strep throat from this group. I hadn't had strep throat since elementary school. But now I had it so often that doctors were talking about removing my tonsils. Second, the polycule was big and socially all-consuming. I got into this because I wanted one or two part-time lovers, not a 7 days a week partner. So why the hell am I at my boyfriend's girlfriend's son's middle school basketball game? It's too much. And it turns out Jake sort of was a cult leader with a harem, which kept growing, meaning each of us got less attention and his communication with each of us dropped accordingly. In the beginning, I was impressed by his fluency in therapy speak. He sounded so mature and knowledgeable about poly relationships and all the words he used. Eventually, I realized he merely thought he was self-aware and self-actualized, but in reality, he was pretty ill-equipped to recognize and handle his own emotions, let alone those of all of his partners. And he couldn't admit that he'd even that he'd been even slightly in the wrong about anything, ever. I saw this cult leader, harem builder, personality type in a number of poly men I met. I felt a little foolish when I finally realized it. Here I thought I found this enlightened, non-traditional approach to love and sex, but it had been corrupted by just another flavor of patriarchy. While I may have been in the harem of Jake, he didn't control me. I was dating people outside of the polycule and felt like I was experiencing a true sexual renaissance as I questioned all cultural values of my upbringing, like monogamy, heterosexuality, and purity culture. Inevitably, Jake couldn't juggle all of us forever, and it came crashing down. 7 of us dumped him in a 2-week period, which I found hilarious. I don't know if I'll ever willingly join another polycule. I still identify with ethical non-monogamy and sometimes have transcendent sex, but for now, I only date people who don't also bang my entire friend group. There are fewer orgies, but way more peace.